Friends, the marriage of a prince to a peahen has taken place. This is such an interesting story that hearing it will surely bring joy to your heart and allow you to lose yourself in childhood memories. After all, this is a tale that many of us have heard from our elders at some point during our childhood. Let me narrate this astonishing story to you in a new and captivating style. In a certain kingdom, there was a king who possessed everything bestowed by Allah. The only thing he lacked was an heir. He had no children. The absence of a child saddened the king's queen even more than it did the king himself. Day and night she would weep, finding no joy in food or drink, no pleasure in jewelry or fine clothes. She neither sought solace in any sorrow nor celebrated any happiness. The king deeply loved his queen and would often comfort her, explaining that perhaps it was Allah's divine will that denied them children. He urged her to be patient and to try to lead a life filled with laughter and happiness. While the king found solace in managing the affairs of the kingdom, the queen's heart remained restless, constantly burdened with worry and sorrow. Many advisors suggested that the king take a second wife, believing that another queen might provide him with an heir. However, the king was unwilling to break his first queen's heart. He did not want to hurt her, and one day, an important maid, Allah's chosen servant who was always by the queen's side, rushed in and said, "May Allah keep you safe, queen. Your fortune has rising. I have heard that some highly revered dervishes have arrived in our kingdom. It is said that whatever you pray for, they can grant. If you permit, we could bring these dervishes before you. They might beseech Allah on your behalf, and with their prayers, perhaps Allah will bless you with a child." The queen took a deep breath and replied coolly, "No, our wishes will not be fulfilled, and our arms will remain empty. Our throne and crown will pass to others, and no one will remember our name. You know how many pious men and saints we have already sought blessings from. But, Your Majesty, we could try once more. Maybe this time Allah will grant the deepest desires of your heart." The maid insisted. Flattered by the maid's praise, the queen finally agreed to summon the dervishes. When the king learned of this, he was happy to meet these esteemed men to secure his queen's happiness. On the appointed day, the palace was abuzz with activity, as a grand platform was prepared for the arrival of the dervishes. They arrived, exuding an aura of goodness, their faces seemingly radiant with light. When invited to sit on the throne, the dervishes declined, saying, "We are merely humble ascetics. We do not know of thrones or chairs. The ground is our seat." They laid out their simple mats on the floor and began to chant prayers. The king and queen presented themselves before the dervishes, who then spoke. "Queen, you will surely experience the joy of having an heir, but not immediately. After many years, you will hear good news about your child." Upon hearing that the queen might have a child after several years, her face blossomed like a rose. However, knowing that the joy would come so far in the future made her sad, and tears welled up in her beautiful eyes. Seeing the dervish's reassuring demeanor, he said in a soothing tone, "Patience always bears sweet fruit. You too will receive the rewards of your patience. But," they continued, "if your heart remains sad all the time, you need to find a way to distract yourself, to keep your mind occupied so that you have no time to dwell on your sorrows. Spend some time in silence, and then perhaps you can try again. You could cultivate a beautiful garden filled with exquisite flowers. Keep it meticulously trimmed and adorned with ponds, fountains, and various birds. This will keep your heart joyful and occupied, leaving you with no time to think about not having a child. the dervish suggested. The king, impressed by this ingenious plan, happily decided to bring the dervishes before him. Understanding the queen's need for happiness, he agreed to meet them. The following day, the queen began the work of establishing a magnificent garden. She ordered the finest plants to be brought in, transforming the area into a sprawling oasis. A large garden emerged, complete with marble paths, ornate gates, lush green lawns, and an array of fruit-bearing trees like guava, pomegranate, apple, banana, and orange. There were also trees of dry fruit such as cashew, almond, and walnut, alongside flowering plants of every color imaginable. In the center of the garden was a beautiful pond inhabited by colorful fish and a pair of graceful white swans gliding serenely. The garden was so breathtaking that it seemed like a paradise. The queen took great care of it, often strolling through its paths with the king in the mornings. They would walk until tired, then sit by the marble basin, enjoying the sight of the fish and the tranquility it brought. Gradually, the queen's sorrow faded away, and she began to find joy in her daily routines. As the days passed, the fruit trees grew tall, the flower plants became dense, and various birds started nesting in them. Lovely birds with vibrant colors added to the garden's charm with their delightful songs. The birds began to build nests, and despite the gardener's attempts to remove them, the queen firmly insisted that the nests remain, fearing that their removal would spoil the garden's beauty. One pair of peacocks built a nest high in a dense tree and laid eggs. Unfortunately, one egg fell and broke, leaving only one egg to hatch. The peacocks lovingly cared for the remaining egg until a chick emerged. The queen adored this peacock pair. They were as gentle and innocent as doves, playing and fluttering around the garden all day. Whenever the queen held out grains of wheat or barley, the queen would flutter gracefully and take the grains, bringing joy and laughter to the queen. As the peacock chick grew, it developed a plump, soft body and beautiful pink eyes that made the queen's heart flutter. This little peahen, much like her mother, became very dear to the queen. When the chick was ready to fly, it would come to the queen when called, perching gracefully on her lap or shoulder and pecking at the assorted grains of raisins, almond mash, walnut mash, and tiny pieces of cashew that the queen provided. The peacock chick, now named Princess Peacock, became a source of immense joy for the queen, dispelling her sorrow over not having an heir. One day the queen said, "King, I want to have anklets with bells made for my peahen daughter so that her every flutter is accompanied by a melodious sound." The queen's request was granted, and golden anklets adorned with diamonds were crafted for Princess Peacock. The queen gently placed the anklets on the peahen's delicate feet. At first, the peacock chick was a bit startled, but soon it moved gracefully, flapping its wings and dancing to the sweet jingling of the bells. This delightful sound brought even more happiness to the queen. Years passed, and Princess Peacock grew into a magnificent bird, laying eggs that hatched into numerous chicks. The garden flourished, becoming more beautiful and vibrant each day. People from far and wide came to admire it, seeking the queen's permission to stroll through the paradise. The garden became renowned as the Queen's Garden, famous for its rose blossoms. One day, a prince from a neighboring kingdom visited the garden. The king warmly welcomed him, recognizing his potential successor. The queen was delighted to show the prince around, introducing him to the splendid flowers and plants. As they toured the garden, the prince heard the enchanting jingling of the anklets, resembling the delicate sound of a girl's anklets walking gracefully. Curious, he looked around, but saw no one. When he ventured a short distance away, the sound returned. Intrigued, the prince asked the queen, "Queen, where is this enchanting sound coming from? Is someone else wandering around here?" With a mischievous smile, the queen replied, "Yes, my dear prince, my daughter is also strolling through the garden." "Is she very young?" the prince inquired. The queen responded, "A child always remains a child in the eyes of her parents, no matter how old she grows." Ah, she glanced at Princess Peacock, who was calmly walking on the grass, her anklets jingling with every step. As the peahen flew up to perch on a tree, the jingling grew louder, and the prince found the sound delightful. He thought to himself that perhaps the queen's daughter was now grown up and as beautiful as his own mother. If our marriage takes place with her daughter, what a wonderful union it would be. We too are without parents, just as she is without a child. This kingdom is ours, and so is her kingdom. My dear queen, you have become very ill. Just yesterday you mentioned that if our marriage is arranged, your deepest wish will be fulfilled. The king and prince were determined to proceed with the marriage. The prince returned to his kingdom and proposed the alliance on behalf of his father. Upon hearing the proposal, the king and queen were astonished. When the prince's proposal was intended for their daughter, the king began to speak. "Our daughter is only 10 years old. How can we marry her off now?" The queen interjected, "This is a good thing for us. Such a fine match has come for our daughter. We truly like the prince, but our daughter is still too young, only 10 years old. If we wait until she turns 12, we can proceed with the marriage, ensuring that the prince fulfills his wish." After some hesitation, the king agreed and sent another messenger. Meanwhile, the queen and the prince were deeply worried. They had no daughter, so how could they proceed with the marriage? The queen was troubled, but she couldn't understand why the dervish's advice kept resurfacing. The king reassured her that patience would eventually bring them the child they desired. When the second messenger returned with the marriage proposal, the king was taken aback. He wanted to speak up, but the queen gently held his hand and said, "It's a good thing that such a fine proposal has arrived for our daughter. We truly like the prince, but our daughter is still too young, only 10 years old. If we wait until she turns 12, we can proceed with the marriage, ensuring that the prince fulfills his wish." The messenger agreed, and the prince's proposal was accepted with a condition. The princess must go to her new home without being seen or heard by anyone else. A separate palace would be built for her, where only her nursemaid would take care of her. And no one, not even the prince, would be allowed to see or hear her for 2 years. A magnificent, secluded palace was constructed for Princess Peacock, far from the city, ensuring that no one could hear or see her. The palace had no windows or lights, only a door that remained closed at all times. The princess was married off with great pomp and ceremony, and her wedding procession arrived at the separate palace. People believed that the peahen was the bride, but little did they know the truth. Inside the palace, the princess, carrying a cage, entered her new room, where the king's beloved peacock was kept. The prince couldn't see or speak to her, but he was confident that after 2 years he would not only see her, but also spend his life with her. Meanwhile, the queen mourned the loss of her beloved peahen, Princess Peacock, and brought her back home occasionally, placing the cage near her lap. Tragically, on that very night, the queen passed away, plunging the entire kingdom into deep sorrow. The prince was devastated by his mother's death and spent 6 months in mourning. As the mourning period ended, an inexplicable desire to see Princess Peacock awakened in his heart. He became despondent, losing interest in hunting, swordplay, and horseback riding. He wandered aimlessly through the forest, unable to forget his beloved peahen. The royal advisors suggested a way to fulfill the queen's last wish without breaking the condition. The prince, accompanied by his friend, climbed the high walls of the palace where Princess Peacock was kept. Reaching the courtyard, he saw her graceful figure walking on the floor, her anklets jingling melodiously. Determined, he entered the room, only to hear a loud scream as the princess fluttered out of the open door, her anklets still jingling. In a panic, the prince chased after her, but she had transformed into a beautiful, slender peacock, perched on the palace wall. Realizing his mistake, he returned to inform the king that the princess had escaped, breaking the 2-year condition. The king summoned the queen and explained that the peahen was actually their daughter, Princess Peacock. Overwhelmed with joy and relief, the queen embraced the princess, who exuded the fragrance of roses and jasmine flowers. The princess explained that she had wandered out of her room, remembered her mother's love, and had been guided by an elderly man in the forest who transformed her into a peahen. Celebrations erupted throughout the kingdom. Sweet treats were distributed, the poor were fed, and clothes were provided to those in need. The prince and the princess were joyfully united, and the kingdom thrived once more. The garden, now even more beautiful, became a symbol of love and perseverance, reminding everyone that with patience and faith, even the deepest sorrows can be transformed into everlasting happiness. Did this story bring back fond childhood memories for you? Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. Also subscribe to our channel, Masa Voice, to become a part of our family. Thank you.